What's up, YouTube? It's you again. As you can see, I'm about to do a Cinebench R23 run. I've recently upgraded to, you may not be able to see this, but this is a 5950X. And I'm still using the Inwin 301, so I figured somebody might be interested in knowing how it does in there, considering it was pretty warm with the 3900X, and I'll tell you, it runs even better. Well, obviously, like it's a better processor, but because of the better yields for the sort of the top shelf Ryzen 9s as opposed to the 900 series, the 950s have much better yields, and as a result, the silicon is much better and doesn't require nearly as much voltage. So I'll run a Cinebench R20 real quick. You can see right now it's hovering at 58 for the CPU. The MOSFETs on this board can handle it just fine. I'm not sure about the other parts of the VRM because it doesn't obviously give me choke or capacitor temperatures, nor do I even know what those components could go up to before damage or failure. But it stays in the 40s, or I'd say in the 50s after I run like, I don't know, like an hour worth of heavy workload, which is not bad at all considering the failure rate for VRMs and stuff are decent value or decent quality. VRMs is about 110 C, so as long as you can stay under 100, you're pretty much good. And really, even under 90 is like shouldn't be any problem at all. But like I said, it's maybe dependent upon the individual components, which who knows. But 50 in the 50s is like nowhere near, so I'm not concerned about it at all. But I'm just gonna run an R20, so you can see a baseline, and of course this baseline is going to be a little bit lower than it would be because I'm running Synapse, I'm running Streamlabs, I'm doing a recording, I'm running hardware info monitor, but you'll be able to see what I get with the factory setting for the processor, which is a max of 5 gigahertz and a max voltage, I think, of like 1.55 is what the board specifies. And then I'm going to set it to my own manual setting so you can see just how much you get out of it and what temperature it gets to. So we'll just run it. And you can see via Ryzen Master that it's only running about 3800 megahertz. And it's only in the 60s. It should get maybe closer to 70 than that if you were to run like successive runs. For example, if you were to run Cinebench R23. But you can see the voltage is pretty low, so that's nice. This is because it doesn't require nearly as much voltage per core when it's doing this multi-core workload. And of course, it's like whisper quiet. That noise you're hearing is probably my fridge. Probably not even the PC itself. Let's see. Might as well reset this, I guess. And I think I had changed the settings on my Cinebench R20 to run like successive runs, which is why you're seeing it do it a bunch of times and without stopping. I think I had set it to something like 3 minutes or 5 minutes, something like that. Anyway, so here's the CPU temperature. Max it's gotten to so far is 69. But the effective clocks, a max of 4, almost 4100. Really, it's running about 3800 during the whole time that it's running Cinebench. It's only like in between then that it like you see it jumped up just now. Because when it's only doing single threaded or single core workloads, like for example when Cinebench stops running and it's running like, I don't know, the Streamlabs or just the Synapse software in the background, it's not really using a whole lot. And as a result, it can boost up to quite a lot more. When that happens, though, it actually runs a higher voltage. So as you can see here, it's getting up to 1.394. And so this is kind of the thing, is that when it's doing single thread workloads, it'll use a lot of voltage for the individual cores because the heat's not going to be a problem because it's only running 1 or 2 or maybe 3 cores or something like that. And so the boost clock on those will go quite a bit higher. The problem is, of course, that standard if it knows it's going to be using a lot of threads, a lot of cores, then it's going to drop that clock down, and thankfully it won't need nearly as much voltage to run something like that. But you'll see that like this score is, it's all right. Let's see. I'll compare that to what's on there for the 3900X. But you can at least see that the temperature is not bad. So 9157, and we'll divide that by, where's that, 3900X? 7238. It says it's a 26.5% performance increase. It's really about 30 to 33 or so when it's not running all this background nonsense. But I'm just going to change my Ryzen master setting real quick to what I'm using right now. I got it to run 4500 at 1.2, but it'll do a few cycles and then it'll eventually get hung up and the Cinebench will crash. So I brought it down to 4450. I honestly could probably even drop this voltage some more, but I know this is going to be totally stable, because if it can run 4500 at this voltage, it can, for a little while, then it can definitely run 4450 with no issues. Because with each step of clock speed you run, the as you go higher and higher, the voltage increase that you would require, like to run, if this could run stably at 1.2, it would probably need about 1.225 maybe to 1.25 volts to be able to maintain 4500. And if you were to try to run 4600, it would require quite a lot more than that, probably closer to 1.3. So we'll see here just in a second more or less what this is doing. You can see these are averages right here. 3800 is the average, because like I said, it's spiking while the cycle stops. But I'll apply this, and then we'll compare it to the number that we got there, which I'll write it down right now. It's 9151. Apologize for the noise. So 9151. But I'll stop it. I guess I have to close it, and then, yeah, that's fine. Then I'll reopen it. All right, so here we are. So we'll run it again, but with our new setting. So now I'm only going to let it run to 4450, but it's going to be at 1.2 volts. And I've tried to find basically the highest frequency with the lowest voltage I could run. Basically trying to max out at about 80 degrees C is what I want, because I don't really want it to run any higher than that in case I'm doing something really lengthy, a video export or an Unreal Engine build, or even I don't know, a CAD simulation or something like that. So if I'm running something that's going to be pretty lengthy, I don't want it to run hotter than 80 degrees for a long period of time, because, you know, degradation and such. So I think 80 is fair. So I'll run it now, and we'll see what this gets to. So now it's running a flat 4450. The voltage IDs are still reporting about 1.1, 1.103, but we can see here the CPU core, the effective voltage being 1.2 right here. And you can see that in Ryzen Master as well, that it is running 1.2 volts. Unknowingly, I'm gonna have to keep having to click back to this probably. So you can probably hear it now. Now it is getting pretty noisy, because I did set my fans to max out at 80 degrees. Because like I said, if I'm doing something like that, like I'm doing a video export and I'm just gonna leave my computer sitting for a while, then I don't really care that it's gonna be noisy. I'm just gonna accept that and I'm gonna leave it alone. So I'd rather it stay nice and cool. So you can see it's maxing out right now at 79.1. All the clocks are staying at basically 4450. Of course, these are averaging a little bit less than that because there's that time in between where it's not really running. But you can see here, 79 degrees, MOSFET's at 54, CPU socket at 63. It's probably gonna kick this out again. Not if I hold it. All right. So 10,745. I guess I can compare that to the old score. 10,745 divided by 9151. It's a 17% increase in performance multi-core over what the standard setting was allowing it to. But this is kind of like board dependent and stuff, and BIOS dependent, is that the CPU will run at a certain frequency for a certain temperature, sort of given what the board will allow it to do, and the manufacturer of the board kind of knows more or less how much voltage and stuff it can handle setting to a CPU, and especially to how many cores and stuff. So it's not that they're incorrect, it's that they're overestimating how much of a load this is going to be, and that's for good reason. Obviously, like, they don't want to underestimate and then be wrong, and then it causes damage to your components. So I think 79 for the CPU and 54.5 for the MOSFET, even if it goes up to 60, honestly. And the CPU socket being at 63. The chipset being 35. What else do we have? The PCIe being 38. Yeah, because it's just running the GPU. They're doing nothing. Drive temperatures are still in the 30s. So absolutely, totally fine. And you can see where the fan speeds are here. It might kick it again, but I'll bring it back up. So the CPU is running, when it's maxed out, it's actually 1800, but it's running about 16, it says 1775. So it has hit it, but it doesn't really hit it until it passes 80. So that's fine. And then this is 5240. This is a kind of a misreport. This is some fans that I have sitting on my RAM. They're tiny Noctua fans, but they seem to report like twice the speed of what they're actually doing. I'm not really sure why that is, but I'm okay with it. I don't really hear them. So these are new fans that I've got in there now, which I've actually switched from the Cooler Master Cycloflow V2s for the case fans to the Scythe Kaze. Kaze, of course, means wind, but the Scythe Kaze has a really, really low minimum RPM, like 300 and change. And so that's why I got them, is because I didn't have a problem with how noisy the computer was while it's really running hard, doing something like this. I had a problem with it. I had a problem with the noise while it was idle. I could hear the computer, and like I can hear my fridge and it annoys me, and I can hear when I turn on my overhead light in the kitchen and it annoys me. So I'd like it to be totally dead silent as much as possible throughout the day. Of course, my voice sounds like garbage because I'm sick, but yeah, the fans were a little too noisy. I left those on the CPU because they did cool the CPU a little bit better, and because they're on the inside of the case, they're not the case fans themselves. I don't hear them quite as much, and so that's why you can see those are on the CPU. But the other two here, these are the Scythe Kaze, and these are reporting different numbers. I'm not really sure why. I have two of them hooked up to System 2 and one of them hooked up to System 3, and I imagine perhaps that's why. But yeah, what I found was, because I texted this to myself the other day, is in Cinebench R23. Actually, I'll just open R23 to show it to you, to show you the scores and stuff. So here's R23. Oh, it didn't keep my score in here. I don't know why. I have a picture of it right here, but I'll report the numbers to you here in a second. So the 3900X, the best I could achieve it with it at running maxing out at 80 degrees C was 18759 in R23. And then when I ran the 5950X stock, I got 25,000 flat. It's 24,993, which is like a, let's do the math on that. I'll do 25,000 divided by, no, I'll do 24,993 divided by what the score is, 18,759. That's my actual score with the 3900X. 33%, 33.2% increase. And then I used my, I tuned it using Ryzen Master to get as good as I could get and maxing out at 79C or so. I got 29,295. So 29,295. If I divide that by the score that I got, 24,993, it is still just a 17% increase, just like it was in R20. But dividing this by the score that I get for the 3900X, 18759, I get a 56% performance increase. That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. A 56% performance increase for the same temperature. And actually, I've switched to quieter and slower, effectively, case fans, which may or may not make a difference. It's a little bit quieter at full load than it was with the Cooler Masters. But at idle, it is so much quieter. It's like dead silent. And I think that's great. I'm really actually quite happy with them. I just wasn't happy with them on the CPU cooler because they didn't cool it as effectively. Like when I tried to just swap the fans, do the same fan curve and stuff as my SickleFlow V2s, it actually was doing... Oh man, I hope I didn't have my camera blocking the view for that. Shouldn't have been. I mean, I was reading off the numbers anyway. I guess it doesn't matter. But... where was I going with that? Yeah, the when I tried just swapping out all the fans with the Scythe Kazas, it was running to like 83C instead of 80C. So it did go up a little bit, which means they're not quite as effective, at least on the cooler anyway. But they work really great as case fans, like I said, because they're super quiet. And the reason I actually ended up changing was because the Cooler Master SickleFlow V2s, one of them actually developed a little bit of a rattle to it, which really bothered me. So I ended up buying the Scythe Kazas because a while back when I was considering fans and I ended up on the Cooler Masters, the Scythe Kaza was the other one I was considering. So I figured I'd get them. The diffusion for the RGB is not quite as good. You can see the LEDs, and it doesn't light up the fan quite as well, but it looks okay. And for the most part, what I really like and I can't go back from is that it's super quiet at idle. But how much this, I don't know, affects gaming performance, like at the stock or my preferred profile via Ryzen Master, I don't know. Well, I guess we can open a game and see, but I'm also running this stuff in the background, so it may not be 100% like for like, but I guess I can try it. But yeah, 56% performance increase over the 3900X at the same temperature. That's crazy. Absolutely ridiculous. What should we launch? I guess I should do something at pretty low low resolution and then run it high FPS. I mean, I don't know how much you would care if you're running, like if you're playing in 4K, like I've got an RX 6800 in here, and if you're running it in 4K, then the processor's not going to make a huge difference unless you're doing something like streaming or recording or something like that where it can affect the workload on the CPU. I guess I can run a Plague Tale. How long would this take to launch? Hopefully not long. But I know that this game just does not doesn't seem to run super well, which is why I was kind of apprehensive about it. And I would imagine that this uses DX12, but I'm not entirely sure of that. Let's turn that down. I wonder will my overlay work on it. So it says we're running 60, of course, but I'll just have to change the resolution, change the frame rate, take off VSync, really. That's all I gotta do. I guess I can do it here. I might as well load the game first. The overlay is there in the top right. I know I've got the camera in the way of it partially. Those are CPU numbers on the bottom. Oh, the other thing I didn't mention was it runs about 140 watts total. So the CPU does at Cinebench full load with my custom profile, and it's ran quite a bit less than that stock. I want to say like 115 or something like that. Let's see. Settings, graphics. We'll set this all the way down to 1080. Resolution scale, we'll leave it at 100. Vertical sync, no. Alright, let's see what it'll do now. Doesn't look like 1080 to me. Let's see if it kept it. It's still keeping it at 4K. Okay, what I'll do is I'll turn the resolution scale down then. 30%. All right, so there it is, running 240, 239, 247, 251, 258, 266, 248. And it's not maxing out the GPU, but the CPU is only at 20%. Again, it's like doing a bunch of other background stuff too. But it's close to maxing out the GPU. Some games utilize all 200 plus watts, and some games just don't. They just can't pull more than that unless you like really raise the resolution. Like if you do it at 4K and then do like a 150% render resolution or something like that. So in this case, I would say this is a pretty good baseline. We're like between 240 and 260, basically for the most part. It does go below 240 sometimes. It does go above 260 sometimes, but that's kind of like the max and min that I'm seeing at the moment. So I'm going to go back to the factory curve. But before I do that, I'm going to look at what the temperatures are. I'm going to reset this. I'm going to go back into the game. In case you were curious about the GPU, I mean, it's not at max, 66 average and 80 junction is about what it's doing now. I have not changed the thermal paste on this card. I've left it stock. The only thing I did do was put some thermal pads on the back sides of the VRAM to the backplate. So. And it's running the factory fan curve. So let's see. Yeah, still 240 to 260-ish. And it's pulling about 179 watts of the GPU. So let's see what the temperature got to. So it says we're at 58 for CPU. And then 67 average GPU, 83 for the hotspot, and 64 for the memory junction. All right, the VRMs there are fine as well. They're in 60, so no big deal. All right, now I'm gonna go back into Ryzen Master. I'm gonna go back to the default. I'm gonna apply. This will allow the CPU to clock as high as 5,000 if it wants to. Oh, I might as well have reset hardware info. So the GPU is now pulling about the same, 176, 175. I saw it go to 177 there for a second. 66 and 80, 81, 79. It's about the same. I can tell you it's quite a bit noisier. Let's see what our clock speed's got to, or what the average clock speed is while it's doing this. It says it was still doing about 44. Oh, it's no. I mean 4400 I guess is what the average was for the max. Well, the fastest core in there. I'd like to see what it is while the game is in the forefront, just how these clocks are, because I think it's, oh, it says right here, it's GPU frequency on the right hand side, so we can see it here in a second. But I'd like to see what the individual cores are doing, but we can see it's gotten all the way up to 70 degrees. 70 degrees. And the GPU is still showing pretty much the same numbers. It did get up to 83 there. $68, 65.8 for the memory junction, and then 83 for the hotspot. The other thing I should have shown maybe is this, the fan speeds. So I'll go back to my Ryzen Master setting. We've got 1000, 722, well, it's 1023, 722, and 637. And so barely over 1000, and then over 700 and 600. So I'll go back to my manual setting, apply it. Of course, it takes a little while for it to come back down if it does get itself pretty hot. But we'll reset, go back in, and then come back out and look at the fan speeds. It says the CPU frequency is only at 3 gigahertz, 3.4, 3.2. And I guess it's, yeah, it's probably just because the GPU is basically maxed out at this point. So, I mean, really, when you're running a card, unless you've got like a 3090 or something and you're running in like a super competitive FPS or something like that that runs ridiculously high frame rates, I don't think it's going to matter. So CPU 828 And then System 2 and System 3 are 530 and 479 for maxes. So these have dropped. This one, CPU's dropped by like 200. And then the two case fan numbers have dropped by about 200 as well. Well, almost 200 for one of them, and then about 150 for the other. So a pretty decent number. The loudest thing in there for sure right now is my GPU. And I wouldn't say it's loud, but it's definitely not silent. And of course, this is maxing it out. If I just run it at 4K, VSync to 60, then it actually runs pretty nice. And this is pretty much true for like any game that I can run in 4K reasonably, that I just let it run 4K 60. It's 185 watts now, 187. CPU frequency now, because the frame rate is so low, is only at 2 gigahertz or so. In any case, super long, boring video, I know. I've got a bunch of homework to catch up on. I just threw this in the other day, so I figured I'd do a quick update video in case anybody's thinking about upgrading to this from the 3900X or whatever. Yeah, it's pretty beast. I'm thoroughly impressed. Absolutely thoroughly impressed. Oh, one thing, and I should have mentioned this from the get-go. This is actually a pretty big deal, I think. Is let me see if I can make this thing bigger. I don't need to be that big. I can even run myself off the screen like this. Okay. That'll be better. Might as well close this game. Put Cinebench on in the back. No, this is fine. Alright. The other thing I should have mentioned, super important, since upgrading to this, I did update my BIOS because I thought maybe this was the issue, but I can't get my memory to run 3600 megahertz anymore. I've got 64 gigs of Team Group Vulkan T-Force 3600 CL18. Actually, I'll open CPU-Z for you. Hi.
So I'm just taking it one day at a time, and we'll see, like, you know, I'm hoping I have more good days than bad days, so
Yeah.
the things that we have planned can happen, you know.
Who knows? You might feel 100%. You might feel 100% by the time you,
So as you can see here, dual channel, because obviously I'm using all 4 DIMM slots, so I've got to use at least the 2, the A and the B, but I've got 1 and 2 all occupied. So I would like it to run at 3600, but I can't get it to run 3600. I've tried 3466, which is what this is, and it runs this. I haven't tried 3533 or whatever that next step is. I'll probably try it next, but yeah, I can't get it to run 3600. I thought maybe it was the BIOS, so I updated the BIOS, and that's not been the case. And before I updated the BIOS, I couldn't even get Ryzen Master to install. So it took quite a while of me sort of working at it to see if I could fix that. And I've tried like different Radeon software versions, and chipset drivers wouldn't install correctly. Ryzen Master wouldn't install. I updated BIOS, both of those fixed, but still can't get it to run 3600. And maybe I need to clear my CMOS. If I clear my CMOS, maybe that'll allow me to, but as of now, it's defaulted to 2400 every time I try to let it run XMP, which is 3600. But all of these are correct: 18, 22, 22, and 42. Command rate 1. But yeah, that's the only thing that I've noticed, is that I can't get it to run 3600. But it's not really a big difference. I'd say realistically for for the purpose of maybe long stretch stuff, your CPU is still going to be your limiting factor in a lot of things. And then when you're doing gaming, it's really mostly your latency. As long as you're like at 3200 or so, or better, you don't really need faster clocks than that. What you really need is tighter timings. And of course, CAS latency 18 isn't great. It's CAS latency 18 at 3600 megahertz is essentially the same latency as 3200 CL16. So, I mean, that's why I'd like it to run there, because this is now at 18, but it's at 3466. So I've got a little more latency than I should have. I could try a CAS latency of maybe 16 on this at 3466 and see if it'll handle that. Or if I can reset BIOS, CMOS, clear CMOS, and then get it to run 3600, that'd be great. But so far, absolutely impressed by this processor. I was expecting about a 30% jump, which I'm like, it was on sale right now. I don't know if it's still on sale. It's on sale on Amazon. It's on sale at Best Buy. It's on sale pretty much everywhere. But of course, Best Buy will price match Amazon. So Amazon's got the best price on it right now, which is $685. $684.98 was what I saw. So I got it at Best Buy because they'll give me 30 days of like a price drop guarantee. So if it drops within the 30 days, then I can go and get some of that money back, which is kind of what I've been afraid of. And the reason, I know some people said wait, and I did consider like I should probably just wait. But the thing is that waiting for Zen 4 or maybe Zen 3D might not even release a 16 core part, and then Zen 4 might do something like the problem for me is that I need a new motherboard, and I would need DDR5 RAM, because I think they've announced that they're not going to have DDR4 compatibility for it, unlike Intel 12th gen, which can use either. So a new board and new RAM and DDR5 prices are absolutely ridiculous right now, so I don't really feel like paying into that. So I figured, my 3900X is a little slow at sometimes. It's not a slow CPU by any means, but there are some times that I'd like it to be a little bit quicker. So this is a nice stopgap, and it's, like I said, a 56% improvement, at least in Cinebench, which I expect it to be somewhere between 30 and 50 for anything else, essentially. At the same temperature, running the same cooler. So yeah, I think it's a worthwhile upgrade in this way. I know that like I've got basically the best I can get for now on AM4, and I have 64 gigs of RAM, which is sufficient for a lot of the stuff that I do. Yeah, I don't feel like paying the extra, I don't know, $200 to $300 for a decent motherboard plus an extra. I think this RAM 64 gigs of it cost me something like $300 because it's 4 sticks of 16. But at DDR5, I don't know what that would cost. I guess, I mean, we can check DDR5 memory. So this is for 216 gigs. Wait, that's probably not DDR5, is it? It doesn't even show DDR5 listed here. Let's see if this is DDR5 or not. Because this definitely isn't 216s for 134. That's definitely not DDR5. Crucial DDR5, here we go. 32 gig module, $300 for 32. I mean, that's really not bad considering the DDR5 prices we've been seeing. Here's 16 gigs for $175, right? So $175 to get the same amount of memory as I've got now. And actually, this is 4800, of course, which is faster, but it's only really on the low end of DDR5 for the most part. So 175 times 4. $700 on memory. $700 plus $200 to $300 for a motherboard. Yeah, I'm good. I think I'll wait it out maybe to the next generation. I don't know what the improvements over Zen 3 will be, but of course it would require more cooling. Like this is the most cooling I can get realistically. You can't reasonably put a liquid cooler in here. It doesn't really work that effectively since it doesn't have a real exhaust. It just has the one on the back. And I'll tell you, I tried a 120 mil AIO for the back, and yeah, air coolers are better than that. So like I've got a Vetro V5 in there, and it runs great. When I tried the Cooler Master 120, that thing, if this cooler runs about 80 degrees, that cooler would run somewhere about 86. So it's pretty dog water compared to a decent air cooler. But yeah, I'm not trying to pay, $1,000 plus the new CPU to upgrade to the new platform. So DDR5 prices will come down, and AM5 motherboard prices in probably the second generation will be down significantly, at least from launch. Because as you can see, like this set of VRMs handles this 16-core processor absolutely flawlessly. Of course, the RAM not being able to run a 3600 is kind of an issue, but it wasn't really on this processor. I mean, on the old processor, it's only on this processor, and so I don't know. There's still some hiccups here and there. So this is like first impression. I literally put it in either yesterday or the day before. I really don't remember because I've been sick and I've got a giant pile of homework to handle. So, but I hope you've maybe, if you were interested in going from a 3900X to a 39 or 5950 or something like that, and we're curious about whether it'll handle it. Yeah, it absolutely will. And this is the voltage and frequency that I've found, but you might find something different, because even though I tell my board to run this, if you tell your motherboard to run this as well, the two motherboards may act differently. And where mine is reporting 1.2, it might be a little under, it might be a little over, and so will yours. And so you might not find the same frequency to run at the same voltage, but it's not because it can be because of silicon lottery, of course. But even if it isn't, even if you were to put my CPU in a different motherboard, it could be because of just the variability of reported numbers, or the discrepancy between reported numbers and actual values. So there's that. But yeah, absolutely impressed with the CPU so far. And if you'll excuse me, I need to go take some more Dayquil and pick up my homework load. I've got too much homework coming up. Wish me luck. I'll see you guys later.